With the United States finally in the war, including my grandfather, it seemed the balance was about to tip in the Allies' favor. Before that happened, however, events in Russia gave Germany a victory on the Eastern Front and a new hope for winning the conflict. In March 1917, civil unrest in Russia, a revolution, due in large part to the war-related shortages of food and fuel, forced Tsar Nicholas to step down. In his place, a provisional government was established. The new government pledged to continue fighting the war. However, by 1917, nearly 5.5 million Russian soldiers had been wounded, killed, or taken prisoner. As a result, the war-weary Russian army refused to fight any longer. 8 months after the new government took over, another revolution shook Russia. In November 1917, Communist leader Vladimir Ilyich Lenin seized power. More on that later. Lenin insisted on ending his country's involvement in the war. One of his first acts was to offer Germany a truce. In March 1918, Germany and Russia signed the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk, which ended the war between them and caused Russia to lose a whole lot of land to the Germans. Russia's withdrawal from the war allowed Germany to send nearly all its forces to the Western Front. In March 1918, the Germans mounted one final massive attack on the Allies in France. As in the opening weeks of the war, the German forces crushed everything in their path. By late May 1918, the Germans had again reached the Marne River. Paris was less than 40 miles away. Victory seemed within reach. By this time, however, the German military had weakened. The effort to reach the Marne had exhausted men and supplies alike. Sensing this weakness, the Allies, with the aid of fresh U.S. troops, launched a counterattack. In July 1918, the Allies and Germans clashed at the Second Battle of the Marne. Leading the Allied attack were some 350 tanks that rumbled slowly forward, smashing through the German lines. With the arrival of 2 million more American troops, the Allied forces began to advance steadily toward Germany. Soon the Central Powers began to crumble. First the Bulgarians, and then the Ottoman Turks surrendered. In October, revolution swept through Austria-Hungary. In Germany, soldiers mutinied and the public turned on the Kaiser. On November 9, 1918, Kaiser Wilhelm II stepped down. Wait, I thought he'd been captured by Charlie Chaplin. Anyway, Germany declared itself a republic. A representative of the new German government met with French commander Marshal Foch in a railway car near Paris. The two signed an armistice, or an agreement to stop fighting. On November 11th at 11 a.m., the fighting in World War I came to an end.
And so, on November 11th, 1918, the guns fell silent and peace returned. The end.
We're not quite finished yet, Bart. Anyway, the armistice took effect at the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month of 1918. In many ways, World War I was a new kind of war. It involved the use of new technologies. It ushered in the notion of war on a grand and global scale. It also left behind a landscape of death and destruction, such as was never before seen. Both sides in World War I paid a tremendous price in terms of human life. About 8.5 million soldiers died as a result of the war. Another 21 million were wounded. In addition, the war led to the death of countless civilians by way of starvation, disease, and slaughter. To add to this misery, in the spring of 1918, a powerful new enemy emerged, threatening nations on each side of World War I. This enemy was a deadly strain of influenza. The Spanish flu, as it was known, hit England and India in May. By the fall, it had spread through Europe, Russia, Asia, and to the United States. This worldwide influenza epidemic, now a pandemic, killed soldiers and civilians alike. In India, at least 12 million people died of influenza. In Berlin, on a single day in October, 1,500 people died. In the end, this pandemic was more destructive than the war itself, killing tens of millions of people worldwide. Taken together, the war and the flu spelled tragedy. An entire generation of Europeans wiped out. The war also had a devastating economic impact on Europe. The great conflict drained the treasuries of European countries. The war also destroyed acres of farmland, as well as homes, villages, and towns. The enormous suffering that resulted from the Great War left a deep mark on Western society as well. A sense of insecurity, despair, and disillusionment settled over the many survivors.
If you'd like to learn more about war, there's lots of books in your local library, many of them with cool, gory pictures. Well, good night, everybody. The guns fell silent and peace returned. The end.